Now, in adopting the amendment that Deputy Adjournment lodged to the 24th Amendment, which of course still must be debated as amended, the Assembly has adopted an amendment to the effect that loans from the Agricultural Loans Fund cannot be used for any purpose related to the cultivation of cannabis used in products for medicinal use. The Council of Ministers' second amendment has as its central purpose the permitting of loans from the fund for the purpose of assisting medicinal cannabis producing businesses. Accordingly, in view of the Assembly's adoption of the first amendment, in my judgment, the Council's amendment must fall away. Indeed, the only effect of the Council of Ministers amendment, if it was debated and adopted, would be to limit the extent to which loans could be made to hemp producers, which, as a consequence of the adoption of the first amendment, are currently not subject to any such exclusion. So that is my ruling, and we now return to the original amendment. Forgive me?
So I did have a procedural point of order. Could you rule on whether the, so we can at least learn a lesson for next time, whether the amendments were taken in the right order and whether there was would have been a way for them to be taken differently to achieve the desired outcome of either mover?
That's not something that I've applied my mind to fully, but we'll do so and respond either tomorrow morning or in writing to members. Tom Binney.
Asking the question, but given that the ruling on this was given subsequent to the vote, it strikes me that, and I don't know whether procedurally says that the vote should be taken again, because we're now being advised on a vote that's already been taken, and it's quite apparent there was some confusion about the way people voted in the absence of the clarification that you've just provided. So I don't know how that might be addressed, sir.
The vote that you have taken on the amendment of Deputy Adjournment stands, and it's a consequence of that vote that the second amendment falls.
So the point was that had that clarification been provided before the vote, I think a number of people may have voted differently.
Yes, that may well be the case. That may be the case. And it is unfortunate that we have reached this stage, and I was concerned during the initial part of the debate that there may be a conflict between these two amendments, and now that one has been adopted, it's clear that there is. Deputy Howell.
Sorry, sir, I just wondered if you could explain, have we actually effectively voted for Deputy Ozov's amendment?
No, because we're now returning to the debate on that amendment.
Okay, thank you. But
what's happened is that Deputy Ozov's has lodged for debate the 24th Amendment. We began debating that amendment. We only reached the stage of his speech and the amendment being seconded, and then, as is usually the case, we then deal with amendments to his amendment in the order in which they were lodged. We dealt with the first amendment of Deputy Adjournment, which you adopted, and then we were debating the second amendment, which we'll now debate no further, and we're now returning to the debate on Deputy Ozov's amendment, as amended only by the amendment of Deputy Adjournment. Yes.
Sorry,
Chief Minister.
So I just wanted to say, for members that still may be confused, that for those members who feel they might have voted differently had they have known this, can still have the option to vote against Deputy Joseph's amendment as amended.
Yes,
So,
of
secondly,
course.
can I just say I'm very pleased we have Deputy Bailiff in the chair, not a speaker, to deal with this. Thank you very much.
Yes, Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And it's cautious being the first one to actually give a speech and not a question after such a complicated ruling. But if I understand, therefore, from your ruling, sir, members have two choices in voting for or contra on this. One is to reject any changes to the agricultural loans scheme, enabling cannabis growers for all purposes to make equal claim to the fund as any other agricultural grower, or to both restrict there be no medicinal cannabis claims to the loans fund, and such any industrial hemp claims shall total no more than 10% of the fund's capacity and 250,000, because is that not the right?
Yeah,
Oh, you're right. So in fact, there shall be. Oh God. It's become a question, and it's
Deputy
become.
Curtis, you're entitled to be confused because it's an unusual situation. But you can disregard the contents of the COM amendment. It's no longer before the Assembly. We're only considering the amendment of Deputy Joseph as amended by Deputy Jones.
Okay, cool. Brilliant. So that is helpful. So I got that in my mind, and I did start giving out words that that I didn't intend to. But I would like to. I rose to speak early because I still would like some words back from the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, given that the position is now that loans could be for medicinal cannabis or no loan could be for medicinal cannabis. And really, members will then be debating, in essence, whether they want to follow Deputy Joseph or not to that regard. And my questions that I knew I would like to ask with regards to claims for medicinal cannabis now, obviously if defeated contra, again members might shout no, and I would love to be corrected, if this is not adopted, there will be that equal claim for medicinal cannabis as any other claimant to the agricultural loans, is how the Minister understands in practice the securing of loans will take place. The Minister, in his opening remarks to the now withdrawn or fallen away amendment, said that medicinal cannabis businesses are businesses but are no different to any other agricultural business. And the agricultural loans regulations do describe the kind of business that gets a loan, and in particular the security of loans. And for those concerned about agricultural loans for medicinal cannabis and may think, to agree with Deputy Joseph, that it should be entirely restricted, there should be none, they are worried perhaps about the security of government money from the loans fund being lent out. And I note that it is in Article 6 of the regulations, secured loans, that paragraph 1, every loan which the Minister requires to be secured shall be secured by a judicial hypothèque, charged on such of the real property in the ownership of the applicant as the Minister on the recommendation of the board may determine. It goes on. And the question I would ask is, within the industry of medicinal cannabis in particular, is the Ministry aware whether, on the whole, medicinal cannabis companies are those who have significant immovable estate that one could secure a loan against? Whereas the traditional farming model from those farmers that we do know, those who produce, whether it be potatoes or our dairy herds, have, as Deputy Joseph said, they are often cash poor but asset rich. Do the businesses and the businesses that could claim have sufficient immovable estate to guarantee that the speculative nature of their businesses, the loan can nonetheless be secured? And how is he handling that risk, given we've seen the volatility potential for individual players within this market? And so this is, rather than to say yes or no, it is really for the Minister to assure members, given he will likely want members to vote contra on this, how can he assure all members that the loaning of money to medicinal cannabis companies will be secured, and how he can ensure that that money will not be written off from the public purse should those businesses be unsuccessful in their future ventures, no matter how viable their business plan at the time may appear to the Loans Board that the Minister assured us will operate with good diligence. So those are my questions to the Minister about how he intends to secure such loans in the event that this is voted contra and any medicinal cannabis company could apply for a loan. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. From my reading of this, we are now in a situation where what we are debating is whether we agree that the utilisation of funds from the Agricultural Loans Fund will be subject to the restrictions and exclude the provisions of such loans from any purposes relating to the cultivation of cannabis use in Jersey that will be using cannabis-based products for medicinal use. I believe that is now where we are. So we have a simple choice. Do we say that the agricultural loans will only be used possibly for hemp growing, which has no active ingredient? So we can have, you know, if somebody comes along and wants to grow fields of hemp, which is lovely, make rope and nice clothes, and who knows what you can use for hemp for, that's fine, that can be included as an agricultural loan. But the medicinal cannabis industry, which has been spoken about in terms of its as a flourishing industry, just growing into a point where perhaps it could be profitable, will not be accessible to these loans. That's the decision that's been made by this Assembly. And so therefore we are in a position where you have a vote to continue that situation, which was voted on earlier, perhaps mistakenly by some, or you vote against it to say, actually, we will just leave the agricultural loans where they are, and it's up to whoever is making the decision with the agricultural loans to decide where that money goes. I personally have no issue with that. In terms of the medical cannabis industry, I personally, sir, would like to see more scientific evidence behind it, about the biomedical impact of it, the biomedical pathways through the body and the way they work, and evidence of any, and just like any medicine. So before we go into that industry, I would like to see more evidence. I am slightly cynical about it, sir. However, it is an industry that's growing. And if we don't make some sort of step to do that, we're never going to have that data and that information. So I find myself, as I did vote against this original amendment, that I will be voting against this entirely, so that we just leave the agricultural loans where they are and let that body decide on what it wants to do with them. So we've gone through a couple of hours, sir, and we're back to square one, I think.
Here we are. Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Sadio.
Thanks, sir. I'll keep it brief, and I wanted to rise to speak to savour the rarefied air of agreeing with Deputy Morell for a rare occasion. And when he mentioned the word brewery earlier, sir, I thought that we might well hear the term brewery at some point during this budget debate, and maybe it would have been used in a different context if he'd been talking after the 10-minute pause that we've just had, sir, and your ruling that you needed to give. I think what it speaks to is that why have we found ourselves in this position which actually has become a debacle today? And I think it goes back to the fact that actually this isn't the place at all today where we should be debating this amendment. The time at which this amendment should have come should be when the agricultural scheme was proposed in this Assembly, and members who had a problem with it being allocated to certain industries, for whatever reason, they should have made that amendment here on the floor and said, actually, in setting this up, this is the kind of scheme we want to exist, not wait to a budget debate where you can amend a line and say, actually, wait for that funding to be transferred and have the debate here during the complexity, as we know, of a budget debate. And I think that's the lesson we should be learning from this, is don't have these kind of high-level, in principle, amendments coming at a time when they should have come much earlier. I accept that we all have busy work streams and sometimes we miss the boat, but I think that is a direct contributing factor. I won't give way. I think the
point of correction, sir.
He's not giving away.
If it's a point of order, sir, I think the deputy can correct me.
I don't know whether this is a point of
I'm
order.
not giving way, sir. I'll listen.
He's not giving way, so you can't.
It's basically saying something that's factually incorrect.
Well, you've got a closing speech, haven't you? Yes.
It's never stopped people in the Assembly before. I think you're not allowed to lie in this Assembly, and while some members might have come perilously close, I'll be happy to be corrected on points of fact. But this is just simply saying it as I see it. In my experience, it would have been much more appropriate for this amendment to be been moved at the time when the agricultural loan scheme was being moved. And I think this is the problem about what happens when you try to micromanage a scheme and a process which has been set up. And what I say and what I agree, in fact, I might have different, I don't know if I have different points of view from Deputy Ward or other members about the use or the growing of cannabis in the island. I'm quite agnostic on it, if I'm honest. Is that actually, by all means, it may be an industry that succeeds, it might not be, but I think it is an industry that is here. And I don't think we should be looking to micromanage, as I've said, that scheme. Let anybody who's a grower of cannabis decide if they absolutely must to apply for this scheme. I'm not sure if anybody's applied to date, and I'm not sure if they will, but it will be decided on a case-by-case basis alongside the dairy farmers, the potato growers, the carnation growers, perhaps even the beekeepers, and I don't know if there is any other key industries, the broccoli growers, you know, let's keep going, who might wish to apply. And this, it also seems to me that actually, if you're growing cannabis, you may not actually know what it's going to be used for, in the same way that when you grow potatoes, you might not know what the potatoes are going to be used for. You might get an order of potatoes and find that actually somebody wants to make a whole load of vodka with them. You might find that they want to make chips with them. You might find that they want to make crisps with them. You might be growing a field full of sugar cane and find that actually somebody's going to be using it to make Coca-Cola somewhere along the line, which you also don't like because it's bad for you and it can rot your teeth and make you diabetic, or it could be used for some other more noble purpose, depending on what your personal view is of the sugar industry. And I think this is really difficult when we get to try and make perhaps, and I think these are, this debate is being tinged by some of those personal views that are trying to micromanage a particular scheme. And let's remind ourselves it's been set up to innovate, and it's been set up to support the economy, but also to support the agricultural industry, sir. I think those are just the last points. Actually, the last points I wanted to make is that this whole suggestion that you can somehow get high by walking past a field of cannabis is just, I think, it's quite ludicrous. And it's been said that you know, you wouldn't get high by walking past a brewery, but that's not the correct analogy. It's suggesting that you might get high by walking past a field of barley, because the cannabis in the field or in the greenhouses hasn't been processed yet. So I think I was thinking along the same lines as Deputy Morell. Would I prefer to have a glass house full of cannabis next to me, or a field which is being sprayed with silage for several weeks of the year, which I can certainly smell? Because I don't know what this smell of cannabis is when it's growing in greenhouses that permeates. And again, that's highly subjective. So I would bring it back to the point that actually I think members are seeking to impose some of their own prejudices on a scheme which has been set up to act impartially. The scheme isn't going to be administered by politicians or directly by the minister. It's going to be very much a paper-based, criteria-based exercise, and it's not for the minister or any of us here, I think, to impose our prejudices about what kind of industry should be able to access that, sir. And I do ask members, after all of this confusion, to actually just reject and revert to the original position, which should be let growers apply for loans on the merits of their business plans, according to the process, and if their business plans stack up, they can access loans, which they have to pay back at 3%. This isn't free money which is being given away. It's money which will be given with a caveat that there's a business plan attached to it. And I think we don't need to do the work for that scheme.
Thank you, Deputy. Maybe Scott, your light was on briefly. Oh, a while ago. No, you don't want to speak?
No, not intentionally, sorry.
All right. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Wow, it's probably the first debate around cannabis that myself and Deputy Tadia would not agree. I know that everyone knows my views about cannabis. I brought amendments. I was very supportive of bringing medical cannabis to the island and open the clinics. So I think that I'm maybe one of the few, probably it's very difficult to say about my views as a prejudice to cannabis. Second thing, Deputy Tadia said, why you didn't bring amendment to the agricultural loans? In my mind, medical cannabis is not agriculture. Medical cannabis is pharmaceutical. Now, if we would like to be distinct jurisdiction to get full benefit and to be one of the leading jurisdictions around medical cannabis, it needs to be clear pharmaceutical. Pharmaceutical when it's grown in very clean, regulated, strict environment, not in glass houses, not on the fields where the weather is affecting every time. Pharmaceutical, when it's medical cannabis, it needs to be very clear, consistent standard that doesn't depend on the weather. What we are missing, and this is, and probably people seen on my conflict of interest in the previous term, because before I became a state member, I've had some knowledge about it. The only companies that are succeeding now in the world, it's the very clear pharmaceutical companies, and the only thing that we really can do to succeed medical cannabis on the island, it's to create proper regulations. If we would like to be different and innovative, if we would like to be the beacon, if we would like to really attract proper investment and not the agriculture, if we would like that Jersey will be seen as well as advanced in something different and not in agriculture, let's stop call medical cannabis agriculture. It's pharmaceutical industry and needs to be treated this way. And this is really important message, not about the companies receiving or not receiving funds. If we want to send clear message to everyone, including investors, if I want to send a clear message to the medical cannabis world that we are serious, let's create proper industry and see the income. Minister spoke about 20% of income. I've heard about 20% of income in 2018. We're in 2024. I haven't seen much income apart from the influence and the people who are in St. Mary and other parishes are not happy. But they would be much happy if it would be a completely clean, strict environment that everything is under control. And this is why I believe if we stop calling medical cannabis agriculture, it would be easy to make the decision on this amendment if it's agriculture or not.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Brenoff.
I wondered whether you might call me after that, because I'm in the slightly strange position of disagreeing with Deputy Gardner's reasoning, but agreeing with her conclusion. Just to add to yet more confusion to the day. So I think this whole argument about whether it is or is not an agricultural product and so on is not really the relevant factor. It's been said that it's not normal farming. Well, it is farming. The product is farmed. It's farming. Most farming today is highly scientific. A lot of it happens in big glass houses with drips and so on. It's this thing called precision agriculture, which is agriculture controlled by computers, applying nutrients and so on. That happens in fruit orchards in Florida and so on. So farming today is very advanced in that respect. So to me, it's not the most relevant factor about whether this is an industrial product or not. It is farmed initially, and then it becomes a medicinal product. You could say morphine is in the same category. It's farmed as opium, and then opium poppy, and then becomes, through processing, a medicinal product. So I'm not anti-medicinal cannabis as a product. I want to make that very, very clear. I do think it needs to be much better controlled, and I welcome the Health Minister's words on that recently. I also happen to think, along with Deputy Ward, that it may be overstated in terms of its medical qualities. But that's not the point. The question really is whether there's a market or not. So I was the minister who changed the regulations so that planning applications were required for cannabis cultivation. That wasn't because I'm against the industry. It was because it was very clear that the environmental impacts were considerable, and therefore the industry needed to be judged against planning and environmental policies. Too lax a regime had been adopted at the beginning. I'm also not against the farming of medicinal cannabis in Jersey. I was also the minister who asked officers to re-examine planning consents around one particular development, which, when that process played out, led to some cannabis developments being deemed to be in breach of planning control. That was partly to do with environmental considerations around those operations. And I would just say that although odour was one of them, it isn't, as several people have said, about getting high, but it is about the unpleasantness of a very strong odour that can pervade the area around the farm. That good cannabis growers are able to control that. And the truth is that there have been good cannabis producers in Jersey and some less good ones, or possibly were less good ones. Some of the original cannabis producers are now under new management. I am not against this industry, but that is not the most relevant factor in terms of the amended proposition that we have. For me, what is relevant is what is the best use of the agricultural loans scheme. And to answer Deputy Tadia's point, I think it is allowable that the Assembly micromanage, in his words, the loan scheme. I don't see it as micromanagement. I think it's just a prioritisation exercise. There are many opportunities for that fund to support, many demands on that money that has been put aside into that recapitalisation of the loans scheme. There's the productivity of our traditional farming sectors, but also the development of new sectors, regenerative farming. Something like, I've read somewhere recently, 70 new smallholders have started up in Jersey. Each of those is a possible new growth sector. It is appropriate for this Assembly to have a view on which sectors it feels should benefit when funds are so limited. The point about the medicinal cannabis sector was that it was supposed to be an exciting new sector, and to that end, new entrants were encouraged. No one said at the time when this was first being promoted that this was a sector that might need propping up with cheap loans. And there is a subsidy in the loan, as the Minister agrees. That risks all the wrong incentives. You know, the potential for businesses to locate here, to take advantage of loans here that might not be available in other jurisdictions. The main argument advanced to reject this amendment is that we should trust those who are making the decisions. The risk, I think, around this is that even with all the best intentions in the world, we have already seen the enthusiasm for this sector within government. There is, I think, a risk that groupthink will apply. There is a strong desire to support this industry from within government. It was supported early on by saying that it was a surefire winner. Now that hasn't entirely worked out as planned, they want to make loans available. There is a risk that the decision makers in this will want to double down on their original bet. I think that is why this Assembly has taken the view that they want to consider this amendment with its very sensible amended form. So the Minister is worried that we will send the wrong signal. So let me send whatever signal I can by saying that some medicinal cannabis producers are working very successfully in this island, and I applaud them. They did that without government support. I've been to meet at least one of them, and I thought the operation was brilliant, actually. And I want to send a very strong signal of myself of support for that. I'm not against cannabis cultivation in principle, but I am persuaded by the argument that if it is such a good thing, it should be able to stand on its own 2 feet, and in a world of very limited funds, medicinal cannabis should not be a priority for those loans. There is an opportunity cost. The money could be used on other things. If I heard correctly, I heard the Minister for the Environment say that he did not imagine medicinal cannabis as a usage when the scheme was created, and I also put some store on that. I will vote for this amended amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment as amended? Constable St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I will be very brief, sir. I just feel I need to correct a few misinterpretations. I remember a time many, many years ago, I'm getting on a bit now, that we had the brewery in town, and the wind blowing in the wrong direction, you could finish work and you could smell the hops in the air, you could practically taste it. People, I won't mention which one, we do have several places on the island where cannabis is being grown at the moment. And people have bought their houses, wonderful old Jersey granite farms, when their neighbours were growing roses. Now they're growing cannabis, it's a whole different ballgame. And I will say that the growers are doing their best with filtration systems to try and filter out the odours, but it is nowhere near good enough. And I'm more than happy to direct members to where it is. It's a pungent smell that just hangs in the air, and people come out of their homes in the morning to be greeted by that. It is very, very unpleasant. Well, to my mind, it's unpleasant. Also, there's the roads nearby, and I've heard of the school children on the bus on their way to school. They know what cannabis smells like because they can smell it in the bus as the bus passes nearby. I will be supporting this proposition, sir, and I urge members to do likewise.
Thank you, Constable. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment as amended? Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. If only I could remember everything I said about 25 minutes ago, it would make life a lot easier, though a lot more boring, I think, for States members. Sir, again, I found it fascinating, Constable St Saviour, you know, this rose-tinted idea of farming, the Constable St Saviour, you know, people bought their houses when they thought it was a rose farm and now it's a cannabis farm. Well, that farm could easily turn into a farm with manure smells and other smells with the silage or anything else. There are plenty of smells associated with farming of any type of farming. And I think it's really important that people understand that. Farming can smell, regardless of what you're growing. and there is not one type of farming which has particularly less smells than others, I don't believe. But I come back to my main point, which is my concern is the message this sends to the wider economy about people who are looking to invest in Jersey. I do worry about us saying, please come in on the one hand, but then don't expect us to treat you like other businesses on the other hand. I do hear what Deputy Gardner is saying about pharmaceutical, but that's not where this sits at the moment. At the moment, medicinal cannabis sits within the agricultural sector. That's where it sits, and that's what makes it possible to access the agricultural loan scheme. I think it is important, actually, Deputy Alex Curtis asked about security. And so security on loan, at the moment, the rules are that security on loans over £150,000 has to be given. So a loan cannot be provided if there is no security and the loan is over £150,000. Under £150,000, loans can be considered without security by the board, but that doesn't mean the board has to accept it without security. The board can still insist on security for a loan of that nature. I think, again, because I am keen for us not to make these distinctions, I would be happy were we to reject Deputy Joseph's amendment to require security on all loans around medicinal cannabis, if that was something that made a difference. I think it's something which can be done. I think it's also really important that when the board, which I think quite rightly Deputy Tudyer has talked about the need to let them do their work, one of the things that they look at when they are undertaking those considerations that I mentioned previously in my speech, the applicant must also submit a 3-year forecasted business model, including an 18-month cash flow and a balance sheet, and include 2 years trading accounts wherever applicable. And those financials, that financial information will be sent to an external accountant for review. So again, from a security and understanding perspective, a lot of work goes into understanding the likelihood of the repayment. It has to be said, my understanding of the entire history of the agricultural loan scheme since, I believe, 1974, is that only one loan has only ever not been fully repaid. That's my understanding. I'm happy to be corrected, but that's what I have been told. Everything I've got in my head is exactly what I said before. Sir, when the previous amendment fell, my words weren't expunged, were they, sir?
No, they're still there.
They are still there.
They're there forever.
Because I would ask members to think back to what I've said previously. I do ask members to reject Deputy Osa's amendment. I want us to retain confidence in our economy. I would like Jersey to be much more considerate when we think about economic matters and to think about the messages we give to the outside world. I do worry not just around this, but I worry in many areas of the economy that we give very mixed messages. And this is something that I think is really important for the island to stop doing. We seek inward investment. We need to be international in our outlook. And to do that and to be seen as consistent, we have to be consistent. And that's the only way we will continue to get investment, whether it's in the finance industry, the agriculture sector, or any other sector that comes forward. We do need to provide consistency. And I am very concerned that this debate itself eats away at that sense of consistency. And so, sir, with that idea of supporting the economy and supporting the messaging around that economy and supporting confidence in Jersey's economy and the way we govern our economy, I do ask members to reject Deputy Osa's amendment. Thank you, sir.
Conor Thompson, John.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pleased to follow the Minister. So I'm encouraged by the amount of young people getting into agriculture and the established members of that industry who are reinvigorated by this new loan scheme. So I wasn't able to attend the Farmers' Conference recently, but I was able to watch all of it online. Sir, and I'm also pleased to reinforce the message that Jersey is open for business. I intend to vote against this amendment, but I have to strongly disagree with my Minister about the smells from cannabis farms. Sir, silage and slurry is a short-term effect, and it is incomparable to the strong aromas that have impacted on people's lives, sir. So I've been out to visit people in my parish. We don't have a facility in my parish, we have one just across the road, sir. And I'm aware of residents of St John's who've had to leave their homes, sir, because of the smell, and not be able to return to their homes for several days. I've never known that, sir, for slurry or silage. They are two completely different things. I am pleased to see that there are improvements being made, sir, but the two things are incomparable. Sir, it'll be down to the panel to make the decisions on who they give the money to, sir, and I'd urge members to reject the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor Tom. Does any other member speak before I invite Dr. Joseph to reply? Today?
Once again, I had intended to speak, but I think I must, because leaving aside the issues of smells, because a number of people have covered it, I think that there's some information that should be brought to the Assembly's attention. At present, we've got 4 cannabis producers, and I don't believe there's a single one of them that's invested less than, I would say, on or about 10 million, and in some cases substantially more. And because of the nature of medical cannabis production, I believe they all rely on high levels of borrowing. I recently attended a meeting of the 4 producers, and whilst I stand to be corrected, I don't believe that any of them have a freehold asset suitable for the first charge that I believe to be essential to qualify for an agricultural loan. So in many respects, all of this discussion means very little, apart from the message, sir, that it sends out to future investors. At the meeting I attended, there was also another attendee online. And unless I misunderstood completely, the firm that he represented had a local site, a production licence, and £50 million to invest in Jersey. They weren't looking for an agricultural loan. All they were waiting for was a clear sign that they had the full support of this Assembly. So it's extremely unlikely that any of the people we're talking about are going to apply for an agricultural loan. But I would make the point that if we send out a message that we're actively disapproving of the industry, I think it's pretty clear that the industry will stop in its tracks. And for an Assembly that's very, very good at spending over £1 billion every year, I would just urge people to bear that in mind. I think we need as much tax revenue as we can get. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. I felt that most of what I wanted to say had been said earlier in the debate, but I would like to respond to the comments from Deputy Binet there, and I was grateful to him for outlining his meeting with members of this industry. And I would just like to remind the government that and those who have spoken against these amendments, that this debate is not about whether we approve or not of this industry. This debate is about how we divide up public money and share it in a very stretched financial position. It is not an easy position to make, but the question here is very similar, really, to our approaches in the previous debates about interventions in the housing market. It is about what our approach is as a group of politicians, and it is absolutely, I believe, our role here to direct this board when they make their decisions. What is our political view about contributing public money to this loan scheme and for all of the proposed uses for it? This loan scheme, it is obviously created to support people in the agricultural industry, but this relatively new player in the agricultural industry, and as the deputy who spoke previously has outlined, has come to the island with backing, large amounts of financial backing. Those businesses did not make the decision to move to this island based on the potential that one day the government might decide to give them a loan. They did not make that huge financial decision based on that potential point. That was something I presume would not have been expected by any of them at the point that they wrote their business plans and they decided to move to Jersey. Why did they decide to come here? They decided to come here because we are a low tax jurisdiction. We are open for business. We believe in business. And also, I believe there was a promise that we would develop world-leading regulations. Well, sir, I do believe that the current Chief Minister is the person who promised those world-leading regulations in a former role of his, and we're still waiting for them.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I will be supporting Deputy Osif's amendment. I want to make it clear this isn't because I disapprove of the medicinal cannabis industry, far from it. But in fact, rather curiously, Deputy Moore has articulated some of my thoughts in this area, but along with the general thought I have that government shouldn't be giving out money just too enthusiastically to support businesses, I can make a case for supporting agriculture, traditional agriculture, on the basis of the guardians of the custodians of the countryside, lovely fields that support our tourist industry and our environment, that don't typically require fields to look like kind of prisons. And the contribution towards, to some extent, towards food security and these sort of things. I tend to agree with those people who say that when it comes to medicinal cannabis, this is a pharmaceutical industry. So I just thought I'd make my position clear because I absolutely want to emphasise that I do support the medicinal cannabis industry, but not in this way.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this amendment as amended? Yes, Deputy Osif. Wish to reply?
Thank you, sir. So let's get, I think, straight to the point. The medicinal cannabis industry I wasn't here at the time, but I've looked back at state's records. It was not being advanced as an industry that would require public subsidies. This, at the end of the day, is about a 2 million allocation of a loan fund initially in this year's budget for agricultural loans. That's all that's going to be available. I'm looking to the Treasury Minister to confirm that it's the case. I have to correct Deputy Tazier. There was no other opportunity. in the previous debate about the establishment of the agricultural loans scheme, because all we were doing was appointing members of the board. And it was at that question time, in that summing up, it was probably not an appropriate question, but I asked whether or not the board members that were being appointed were going to approve cannabis loans. There was no ability whatsoever to put any restrictions on the loan thing. So I would ask him to consider the fact that he thinks this is too little too late. So medicinal cannabis is a crop requiring controlled environments. There is fences around it, the productions. It is a controlled product. It is a controlled product with huge controls over it. It's almost like it going into, dare I say, it's almost going like in prison. And I wasn't saying I was going to get stoned by smelling it, but the pungent smell was so strong, I thought that some people might worry about it. I basically know you don't, but I thought that I'd ask a friend for the avoidance of that because it was so strong. This was a industry that the then Senator Farnham has been a vocal advocate for. It's called medicinal cannabis. He spoke in a conference in London in June 2019, talking about Jersey's intention to develop a medicinal cannabis industry, positioning ourselves as a centre of excellence in production, research, genetics, intellectual property. Nothing about loans. He spoke nothing about government subsidies. He spoke in January 2021, when the first license for commercial cannabis, medicinal cannabis, was said, this represents the birth of a new impact, high-driving economic diversification, engaging jobs, encouraging inward investment and generating new tax revenues to support the economic recovery. We haven't seen it, have we? We've seen investors looting £30 million because that's on the public record. The minister does speak about the big investment in it, but I do say with some degree of sadness, huge sadness actually, that one lot of investors have had a 90% haircut of 90% of their investment. That's a lot of money. We've encouraged people to do something and they've lost a load of money. In Toronto, Senator Farnham said, plans to become a centre of excellence in production, again, research, genetic, intellectual property, again, and again in London. These statements never said, I mean, I was quite amazed that we were trying to get this thing. I never quite understood what the purpose was. Personally, I think that a number of people think that it's basically a bit of a regulatory arbitrage. And members of the Reform Party who want to basically speak about medicinal cannabis in the health sense, I absolutely agree. I fundamentally am somebody that when in an ideal world, when I was with my late husband after we went to the United States, absolutely against everything, persuaded to go into a cannabis store because I heard about the tax revenue that Idaho was getting from having had legalized recreational cannabis. This assembly has legalized medicinal cannabis. We've encouraged kind of this other industry, and this debate is about whether or not we allow loans to a sector that is not agriculture. It was never said as such, and the point of this whole debate is about the meagre resources that are available by the re-establishment of the loan guarantee, going to the farmers that Deputy Reniff and other people have spoken about. The dairy people, those new innovative farmers that are doing great things perhaps, those smallholders, the sheep producers from the National Trust, the other people that we're going to have to make some difficult decisions about carbon neutrality. That's where I want the money to go to. I don't want to send out the message to big business that they can come here and get loans for their medicinal cannabis failures. I'm sorry to say it. And I know I'm going to get some stick about it, but I'm afraid to say that there's going to have to be some sort of investigation, I think, sir, into how on earth we've got into this position where we had the promises of a new industry that was going to be providing jobs, opportunities, intellectual property. And what have we got? We've got the reality of a business that went nearly bankrupt and has brought our reputation as your former External Relations Minister, where I've had to explain to the United Kingdom why on earth we're doing what we're doing, because there is some questions about it. So I want to be absolutely clear. This is about back to agriculture and to use the meagre resources that the Treasury Minister apparently has to put into our farming businesses that are the farming of the past and the farmers of the future, by getting them to be productive, to be more competitive, to be able to deal with this Assembly's imposition of the living wage, where we've got to help them. And that's what. And they are dominated in my constituency of St Saviour. And I'm proud of that. And I want to be able for those farmers to be able to get those loans to improve their productivity, to improve their ability to pay better wages, and to improve their environmental practice, which we're putting regulation after regulation. I'm afraid medicinal cannabis companies doesn't fit if it's not agriculture. I mean, we can make this all the way around if we want to, but I'm afraid to say members need to perhaps go early tomorrow morning and go around and have a look at a medicinal cannabis greenhouse. Well, you can't get into it. It's not like the old-fashioned glass houses. It's got a wire fence around it because it's growing a controlled substance. Let's not forget the problems, please, sir. Every pound of money going into medicinal cannabis, approved by this apparent loans board with strong support from government, as we've heard, that's going to be a pound, a £10, £1,000, not available to our farmers who need it. And they need cheap loans because they can't get it from the banks. This is about the struggle of helping farmers. I've not been a big fan, like many members know, about subsidies that go into land value. I don't want that. I'm a land value. I want nothing back. I want farmers themselves to be better off. And I want real farmers, not medicinal scientists who are doing intellectual property and doing all sorts of things. And I won't speak about the people that have been laid off that I've had emails from one of the cannabis producers, which upsets me. They are deserving. Our traditional farming sectors, our future farming sectors, are deserving of support. They're deserving of all the money we've got available to going to them. And that's what should be done. In summing up, sir, I can say a couple of, I've been described as having political views from Germany. I am not a prohibitionist. I'm not a member of the Christian Democrat. I'm a liberal. Hans-Dietrich Genscher was my political hero in Germany. I'm not a member of the CDU, and I am not a rejecter of medicinal cannabis. In fact, I've been for a prescription to try and get some. It was jolly easy, sir. It was jolly easy. In fact, it was so easy I couldn't believe it. I tried it, didn't make any difference with all the problems I've had. So actually, but I'm very much in favour of it. And actually, you've got to have a bit of humour, but we've got to take things seriously as well. I mean, really, I was actually going to say, I mean, if we can have cannabis farms, can we have health farms as well as part of the scheme? I don't know. Anything called a farm now is apparently okay. I jest in the spirit of good debate. So, in conclusion, I'm amazed actually to hear members of the Council of Ministers now wanting to vote against this proposition. Why? Where's the whip? I don't know whether it's an instant whip, it's a blancmange, I don't know what it is anymore. I really am completely flummoxed with how to deal with the government of blancmange. I want members, please, to stand by their principles that they told me they supported this, and to give a definition of agriculture that is our true agriculture of yesterday, of today and tomorrow, and to let those meagre resources go to them. And let's have another debate on another day about medicinal cannabis and this industry. And maybe we need a committee of inquiry or review to find out why we're in the mess. I didn't cause the mess in the debate today, sir. Sorry about that. I didn't cause it. I wanted a proper debate. And perhaps the fact that the Council of Ministers' own amendment caused the chaos is an indication of the chaos that exists in the cannabis. A decision well-intentioned of medicinal cannabis now that's got 25,000 prescriptions. A mess in relation to the investors. Let's make a decision for our old-fashioned farmers and our future farmers. And I urge members to vote in favour of the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Is the appel called for? I invite members to return to their seats. I invite the greffier to open the voting. All members with the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been rejected. 18 votes pour, 25 votes contre, and 3 abstentions.
So could we have the votes, please, after all that?
Yes.
Those members voting pour, the Connétable of St Martin, St Clement, Grouville and St Saviour, and deputies Gardner, Gorst, Moore, Osoph, Balash, War, Miles, Scott, Renouf, Jeune, Barbara Ward, Wilson, Andrews and Labby. The members voting contre, the Connétable St Helier, St Brelard, Trinity, St Peter, St John and St Mary, and deputies Southern, Tadier, Morel, Lehegra, Ayer, Rob Ward, Owls, Farnham, Mesick, Coles, Porre, Eltham, Miller, Tombinet, Berry, the Connétable St Juan, and deputies Rose Binet, Catherine Curtis and Doublé. And those members who abstained, deputies Howell, Kovac and Alex Curtis.
So may I propose the adjournment?
Members content to adjourn for the evening? The Assembly is adjourned until tomorrow morning.